So for this week's reading activity, we are going to spend some time with archetypes, but rather than just looking at characters, we're going to look at setting archetypes this week. So setting archetypes are symbolic places in literature. When we look at the story's location, it can be a really integral or key component in our story to the way that it's crafted, and sometimes it can be considered an archetype. So these different setting archetypes are locations in stories that are symbolic to the story. They mean something more than just the place that it happens. There's some deeper kind of feeling or sense we're supposed to get from that place that's supposed to help us understand the story more as a symbol. Now, there are many common types of setting archetypes. There are ones like the cave or the underground. It has a certain feeling, even if you just look at the picture, versus the forest or the woods, maybe a tower or the mountains or a garden. I've included a separate slideshow that kind of goes through all of the deep meanings of these, and they all have specific ones that over time are patterns in literature. There are even more. These are very common types of setting archetypes: the sea or the river or the desert, the small town, the wilderness, or even outer space, or a castle. All of them represent different kinds of things in stories. And again, these are even more: the wasteland, the labyrinth, the winding stairs, a crossroads, the underworld, or a threshold. And depending on the story that you're reading, they can represent a lot of different kinds of things. I'm going to give you some examples. So, for instance, in the book or the movie, The Maze Runner, there is a labyrinth. Now, this is a form of maze, right? Remember the story of the labyrinth and Theseus and the Minotaur. The maze is a symbol that can represent both chaos and order for the gladers in the story. Every night, the walls of the maze move and shift, and that makes it harder for the gladers to find an exit. The doors close every night as well, symbolizing routine and order in the otherwise chaotic maze. And mazes are confusing. So a labyrinth is a place of confusion and disorder, and sometimes problem solving. In the movie Tangled and the story of Rapunzel, you might know this story really well. The setting archetype is the tower. Rapunzel's locked up in a very tall tower so that no one can reach her except Mother Gothel. And the reason why she's locked in the tower is that the witch doesn't want the world to see her. Mother Gothel has evil plans, as she wants Rapunzel's beauty to be hers. She's controlling Rapunzel's access to others and the world for her own benefit. And that tower represents Rapunzel's isolation, right? She's not allowed to interact with others. She's separated from the world. And she's also sort of set up on a high pedestal because of her beauty. If you guys know the movie Elf, I'm sure you probably do, there is a setting archetype there, the castle. Now, in the story, there isn't an actual castle, but the archetype is there. So a castle is a place that defends itself against invaders. And if you remember, when Buddy first attempts to connect with his father, Walter Hobbs, who works in the upper floors of the Empire State Building, Buddy doesn't realize that his father is the shadow of the story, a man who hides in his office surrounded by secretaries and security staff, doing little to nothing as he produces lousy children's books. Yet Buddy, through his kindness and perseverance, is able to penetrate the defenses of Walter's castle for a while, until the story no longer needs the archetype anymore. The Empire State Building functions like a modern-day castle in the movie by making it hard for Buddy to reach Walter. There's lots of barriers in his way as he's trying to access what could be like a king figure. If you think about Walter up high at the top of that building, in charge, and he sort of seems like the king of the castle. One more, Harry Potter. So in Harry Potter, if you're familiar with the books or the movies, there's a forest, the Forbidden Forest. Forests are often a place of enchantment or magic, and that is very true in Harry Potter. The Forbidden Forest plays host to a lot of characters' innermost fears Except for Hagrid. Hagrid seems to be very comfortable in the forest, and that maybe tells us a lot about his character. But the scary setting actually helps us to learn more about the characters than we realize. The name Forbidden Forest supports that. It suggests danger, and that's reinforced by teachers repeatedly warning students not to go near it. Harry's experiences in the Forbidden Forest were mostly chaotic, and they often had some connection to Voldemort as he learned more about his destiny and the people around him. Hermione and Ron and Draco also experienced challenges that revealed their personality traits in the forest, although it's very different than the way that Harry does. And all of that had to do with magic and magical creatures, which is very much that archetype of the enchanted forest, a place of danger, but also of magic. Last one, The Lion King. If you know the movie The Lion King, we talked a little bit about this when we talked about archetypes, but I think there's a great one here, The Wasteland. So if you think about a wasteland, it's like a place of emptiness. And the elephant graveyard is a location seen in The Lion King that's barren. It's filled with the remains of elephants who've died. Shenzi, Banzai, and Ed and their clan of hyenas used to live there. And there's no water in the elephant graveyard. It's a place made out of bones and jagged rocks. This gives the place a haunted feeling. Food and water are nowhere to be found, and this empty space represents Simba's loneliness and desperation, particularly at that pivotal point when his dad is killed, right? So it kind of foreshadows some of those feelings he's going to have later in the story. Your job this week is to read the short story about Rip Van Winkle and pay special attention to the settings in the stories and think about those setting archetypes. Again, I've linked the presentation with some more explanations for you so that you can kind of dig deeper into the settings that you see. Then I'd like you to take a short quiz on Schoology that just tests your knowledge about settings and setting archetypes and your reading in the story. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me this week. I hope that you all enjoy. Have a great week, guys.